Hey guys, welcome back to the Forge. Today we're going to be continuing our Basic Blacksmithing Series here on the channel. We are going to be talking about a hold down, which is a really simple tool to make, but the applications on being able to have a third hand on your anvil are priceless. It makes it to where if you're needing to punch a hole or needing to do some chisel work and you don't have the ability to use a vise, or it just won't clamp in the vise just right, it gives you that third hand to hold something down so you can free up both of your hands to be able to hold your chisel or do any of your work without having to have an extra person there. Because sometimes you don't have an extra person or the ability to hold it, and this will give you that, should give you that ability to be able to hold a lot of your material down. I can't say everything because sometimes it's just going to be that weird piece. But on the majority of your work, if you're punching a hole for a hook or if you're doing chisel work on a leaf or things like that, this will hold it down and make it a lot easier. So I'm going to bring you in close and let you see how the hold down works, and then we're going to go over to the chalkboard and I'm going to show you a technique called upsetting that we're going to be doing today. Alright guys, so let's just say you needed to punch a hole in this piece of steel and you didn't have the ability to hold it with a pair of tongs between your legs or whatever, and you needed to be able to hold it flat, or if you're doing some chisel work on it or whatever. This is where the hold down comes in handy. You'll take it and slide it in you can put it in your hardy hole or your pretzel hole. I've used them in both. This one's designed to go in both. I've seen some that are designed to go just in one or the other. And you just tap it down. And as you can tell, that is not going to move anywhere. So I can come in with my chisel or my punch. If I need to do some cuts in it or whatever, and I can come in with my chisel and it's not going to move. See, it's in here really well. And I can punch a hole or cut it, split it, whatever I needed to do. And then when I'm done, I just tap it over to the side. Get my material out. Then I get my metal out, and if I got to heat it back up or whatever, then I just bring it back out, lay it on the anvil, reset it back in, or continue on with my work. But I just want to give you just a brief rundown on roughly how the hold down works in your anvil. And like I said, it'll work in the hardy hole or your pretzel hole with the size that I made here. Hey, alright guys, so let's talk about the term upsetting. When you upset something, what you're doing is driving the material on itself when you've heated up an isolated area. So let's say this is our hold down piece, and we're using 3/8 round bar. Well, 3/8, once you start driving it down, it could lose a lot of mass where the foot's going to be, so we won't have as much strength for the hold down. So what we're going to do is heat up probably like about a 1 to 2 inch section of it, heat up just that section, and we're going to drive it back on itself. And when we do that, it's going to force the material in on itself, causing it to increase in mass in that area. It's going to shorten it just a hair because we're forcing the metal back on it. And that's going to be the first step that we take when we start forging this, is we're going to upset the material first.
Okay guys, so we are using about a 16-inch long piece of steel. You can go a little longer if you'd like, that's fine. And remember, we're going to be upsetting probably about an inch to an inch and a half of it, so we have enough mass to make sure that foot is good and sturdy. So when we come out of the fire, we're just going to start driving it down on the anvil. If you have some longer pieces, you can use like an upsetting block, which is just a chunk of steel to do some of your upsetting too, and use just the force and the weight of the material to drive it down. Since this is a shorter piece, I'm going to tap back on it with the hammer, really focusing on the end of it, because a lot of times when you're hammering something flat, that very tip can get real thin, and you need that to be very strong. Sorry, I had to play around with the camera a little bit. Couldn't get my adjustments exactly the way I wanted them. So I'm going to drive it down. You can hit on the back of it. I was just showing a few different techniques. This may take a few heats to get this exactly the way you wanted it. I think it took me like 4, maybe 5 heats to get this upsetted completely. Be careful when you're upsetting too, because you can see how the end of this is starting to mushroom over. You don't want it to mushroom. You're not making a nail head. You're wanting it to, push the material back on itself. And I'm just going to knock those edges down so I don't get a cold shut in it. Alright guys, so I got my little pointer finger here to show you our next step, which is going to be us flattening out that about inch and a half, 2 inch section, depending on how big you want your foot to be. You don't want it too big, you don't want it too small, just kind of whatever works for your anvil and the material that you're going to be holding down. We're not doing half on or half off, we're just flattening the material out with a taper to it. We want to leave as much material on where the bend's going to be as we possibly could have. Try to keep everything as square as possible. Just keeping it, you know, you see a good thickness there. We still have about a good, you know, 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, you know, roughly in between there. I didn't put a measuring tape on it or anything. Just wanted just a good thickness right there on the end of the material. Alright, so our next step is going to be to bend the foot over and then go ahead and make our really big J hook. That's basically what we're going to be making here. So like I said, our first step is we're going to bend, flip our material over and bend down to not really a 90 or 45 degree, just get a good kind of just designated area where we want the foot to be, because we're going to have to adjust it once we get the J hook portion. Make sure you have your material good and hot whenever you go to make the loop or the J hook part, because you want it to bend with a uniform bend to it. And just like we did the J hook, we're going to bend over the anvil, pushing the material forward, and then bend it back on itself. If you don't have a horn, you can just hammer back towards yourself. If you have a horn, you can use it to get it just a little bit more uniform. But you can still get it really good and uniform. Just hammer it back towards yourself, like you would with a J hook. And get everything kind of squared up, make sure everything is lined up. This doesn't have to be super precise, but it does need to be, you know, real square, everything lined up, you know, as close as you can get it so it'll have a good tight hold down. Alright, so now we're going to taper the end where it'll go in the hardy hole or the pretzel hole, and that's really just a personal preference of mine. I did that just to make it to where it'll slide in and out of the hardy hole a little bit easier. It won't catch on the side, it's more rounded, so it'll, you know, just slide in the hole a little bit better. It's not necessary, but it's just something I like doing with some of my tools to make it just a little bit easier to get it in and out of the hardy hole and stuff, or the pretzel hole. And there you have it, guys. That's your basic hold down, kind of getting everything just lined up there. This is something very simple, real easy tool to make. Going to quench it off while it's hot, so it'll kind of harden a little bit, but it's mild still. And but yeah, that's your basic hold down right there, guys. Gonna pull it out, let you see how it works. Hammer us a piece of steel in there. But you can see that it holds the material really well, good and tight, so it is not going anywhere.
Okay guys, let's get real for a minute and talk about what you learned today. So you learned how to make a bigger J hook, which is very handy if you're doing like a shepherd's hook or a certain type of candle holder. You've learned how to keep it more uniform. You learned about the upsetting process, which is really handy if you're learning how to do like wood chisels or spears where they have the socket on the back where the shaft goes into it. You know how to push the metal in on itself to give you more mass to draw out that material. It's also very handy in our next project we're going to be doing, which is a pair of tongs. That's probably going to be a 2 or 3 part series in itself, just to talk about and really go into detail of making a pair of tongs. Because easy process once you've done it, but it is very in-depth on the steps that you do them right. When I first got started making tongs, I made them backwards, and things just didn't match up, and they never would work right until I finally slowed down and really learned the steps. So that's where it's going to be, just learning those processes of making and taking our time and really making the tongs. After that, we're going to be making a punch and a chisel. So we're going to be making tongs specifically for that size material. Okay guys, so the material you're going to be needing in the next video for the next project is going to be a piece of 1/2 inch flat bar or round bar. You can pick those up at any of your local hardware stores. The length will vary depending on how long you want your tines. I'll probably be using about 1.5 to 2 foot long piece, and I'll be cutting some of the material off. It'll just give a handle for the forge. For the video after that, when we're making the punches and the chisels, find you a coil spring for a car, or from a car, an old one, and go ahead, if there's a coating on it, build a fire, burn the paint off of it, and get it annealed so you're ready to go, because those are really good spring steel. And I want to say they are about 1/2 inch. Some of them are a little bit smaller, but get the best one you can find. Either way, you'll be able to make a punch and a chisel just about regardless of the thickness of the spring. If it's 3/8 or 1/2 inch, don't get no semi-truck 3/4 inch thick spring. I've seen them. Those, it's just going to be a lot of material to move. Just find you just a basic car spring, and then you're going to cut it into probably about 6 to 10 inch pieces, roughly about how long you want your chisel and punch to be. So those are the next 2 projects coming up, and the material list of what you're basically going to need in that. You'll also need, for the tong video, you're also going to need either a punch and a drift from the sets that I've talked about in the last videos, or you're going to need about a 1/4 inch drill bit and drill. I'm going to do both. I'm going to drill a hole and punch a hole to show you how to line it up. You're also going to need one more thing. If you do not have a set of rivets, we will make a rivet in the video at a 1/4 inch round bar. So that's kind of your material list, and we'll leave a description, or leave the list in the video description. So that's the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit that like and subscribe button. God bless, and keep hammering.